Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. New York Post, Fox News, Reuters. FBI launches criminal investigation of John Brennan, James Comey. This is all over the news now. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. A criminal investigation of both the former Central Intelligence Director, John Brennan, and James Comey, former director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Kash, Patel, President Trump. America's intel agencies have launched investigations, criminal investigations into former intel officials who set up and framed an incoming Republican candidate or Republican president. Hit subscribe to this channel. This is absolutely huge, ladies and gentlemen. You will hear the analysis in a second. This is huge. They're going to be prosecuted. They're going to be indicted. They will be convicted within the prosecution. They were prosecuted and convicted. And the evidence we knew didn't exist. The evidence that a great many people years back, from Comey to Brennan to a whole bunch of officials who were ousted or were forced to resign, was completely fabricated by the Steele dossier and by an overt effort to lie about President Trump. This, ladies and gentlemen, is page 17 of the Mueller probe. This is going to serve as the basis for any indictment, prosecution, and conviction of Brennan, Comey, and others. It won't just be John Brennan. It won't just be James Comey. They're going to indict a great many people. Page 17 is exactly why. Hit subscribe to this channel, to my super chat. Thank you. Second, while the investigation identified numerous links between individuals with ties, so a lot of this is complete nonsense to try to justify an overt attempt at accusing an incoming president of something he didn't do. So they accused Trump of something he didn't do. They accused him of being a Russian operative. It was a complete conspiracy theory predicated upon, literally upon what the Clinton and the DNC purchased. They purchased the Steele dossier. They also set up and framed George Papadopoulos. George Papadopoulos will almost certainly be a witness during all of these prosecutions. But all the people who tried to imprison Trump might very well be imprisoned themselves because they possibly, almost certainly, broke the law. 18 U.S. Code 371 is what one of the statutes Brennan and Comey almost certainly broke. Page 17, and we'll get to the analysis. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. Second, this is the Mueller probe. We learned years back it was all a hoax. It was all a terrible McCarthy-era Red Scare attempt at accusing Trump of something he didn't do. President Trump was innocent, and thank God he won the popular vote, won the presidency again. Only Trump could have done this. But here, second, while the investigation identified numerous links between individuals with ties to the government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign, that's meaningless. The evidence was not sufficient to support criminal charges. The evidence was not sufficient, by the way. They used the phrase, the evidence was not sufficient, to cover their tracks. There was no evidence. There was zero evidence. There was far more evidence of collusion or a conspiracy between Democrats and Russia and other countries than Trump. They literally withheld exculpatory evidence when George Papadopoulos stated that he actually stated in a recording that he would never do the things that they accused him of doing. They still indicted him anyway. And they prosecuted him over a process crime which was meaningless, had nothing to do with any collusion. But among other things, the evidence was not sufficient to charge any campaign official, an unregistered agent of the Russian government. Evidence was not sufficient regarding the 2016 meeting, the alleged Trump Jr. meeting. Further, the evidence was not sufficient to charge that any member of the Trump campaign conspired with representatives of the Russian government to interfere in the 2016 election. There was zero interference. There were the bots and all the Facebook ads. Not one American, not one vote was altered. There's zero evidence of that. Anyone who brings that up could possibly be a complete and utter imbecile. This, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely huge. And might be the first time you hear this, but hit subscribe to this channel. Share this everywhere. We'll be doing a lot of work on this. This is huge. This is really huge. And this is going to lead to prosecution and indictment for sure. Prosecution, conviction almost certainly, even in D.C. courts. Trump is remaking the entire the Supreme Court just backed Trump. He can fire anyone he wants. Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution. He is commander-in-chief. He has intel agencies on his side. John Ratcliffe. God bless Tulsi Gabbard. You have Kash Patel. You have the entire American intelligence agencies leveled against everyone that tried to set up and frame Trump. Donald Trump was an innocent man. Donald Trump was the protagonist in a Chuck Norris or Sylvester Stallone or Clint Eastwood or Charles Bronson movie. And Democrats can't stand that. Hit subscribe. Check this out. This is groundbreaking. I've been saying this was going to take place for a long time. But anyway, let's continue. Hit subscribe to my super chat. Thank you.
Our breaking news, Brooks Singman of Fox News Digital has discovered exclusively that the FBI is now investigating the former CIA Director John Brennan and the former FBI Director James Comey in conjunction with the genesis of the Russia investigation. This comes after the CIA declassified last week a report into how that all came about. Let's bring in our panel to talk more about this. Annie Linsky, the White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, USA Today White House correspondent Francesca Chambers, and Josh Holmes, co-host of the Ruthless podcast and former chief of staff to Senator Mitch McConnell. Annie, start us off here. The fact that the FBI is looking into Brennan and Comey now, when this declassified CIA report came out, people said, will prosecutions follow? We don't know if it'll be a prosecution, but it's an investigation at this point.
It will with almost 100% certainty, without knowing any inside knowledge, it will be almost with 100% certainty be a prosecution, indictment, prosecution, and almost virtual certain conviction. This is in the Durham probe, where William Barr and you still had an entire Justice Department leveled against Trump. Trump did not have a Justice Department his first time around. He did not have an American government that he led. The Supreme Court has backed him endlessly. Even today, he can fire anyone he wants. Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution. Don't cheat your candidates, Democrats. Then you won't get a president with even more power than any other. Trump has more power as president because his political adversaries are so inept and corrupt.
Yeah, this is certainly the logical next step from last week's news. And it does really underscore, I think, the extent to which this Russia investigation that occurred.
We're Phoenix Energy.
I believe, has stayed under the president's skin and sort of in his craw.
It was one of the worst moments in American history, American political, I'm not comparing it to Pearl Harbor, but I'm talking about in American political life. It was one of the worst moments. An innocent man was accused by people who deliberately set him up and framed him. And so this is some of the first analysis. But this is not revenge. This is not revenge. This is justice.
He has personally sued members of the Pulitzer Board for giving a Pulitzer Prize to the Washington Post and the New York Times.
The Pulitzer Prizes should never have been given for a hoax.
Kind of surrounding on this topic. So I think this sort of move fits into this broader concern that the president has about this moment.
Josh, I talked to Ratcliffe about this declassified report last week. He said, look, this is the director of analysis. This is a person who's been at the CIA through several administrations and directors. He has full faith that this is an accurate report.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously new information, but it also corroborates what many of us who've been watching this since 2016 have known all along, which is you had nefarious actors within the intelligence community that were putting their thumb on the scale. I mean, recall just a trip down memory lane. It was Brennan himself was the one who was pushing then Speaker Ryan and then Majority Leader Mitch McConnell
John O'Brennan. John Brennan. John O'Brennan. Let's take a trip down memory lane. John Brennan. Did he have any evidence, John Brennan, with the transatlantic accent? John O'Brennan. One of the most deceptive men in American political history. Let's listen to the great and all-powerful and extremely brilliant and intelligent John O'Brennan. I don't do evidence, I do intelligence.
Did you find direct evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Putin in Moscow while you were there?
Mr. Rooney, I never was an FBI agent. I never was a prosecutor, so I really don't do evidence. I do intelligence throughout the course.
I don't do evidence, I do intelligence, meaning that, of course, we made up everything. We don't do evidence. Well, then what? If you don't do evidence, what on earth are you doing accusing Trump of working with the Kremlin? We have $30 to $50 billion in terms of our funding for intel agencies. Over $30 billion for 3 agencies alone. They couldn't find any evidence. Intelligence has now been reduced to a hunch. I don't do evidence, I do intelligence. Well, do you do any evidence, maybe? Hopefully our evidence also correlates directly to hopefully our intelligence correlates to evidence. Otherwise, what word are we using? Intelligence should be based upon reality, not this absurd, nefarious political hoax that thrusts the country into a new Cold War. Check this out again.
Between the Trump campaign and Putin in Moscow while you were there?
Mr. Rooney, I never was an FBI agent. I never was a prosecutor, so I really don't do evidence. I do intelligence throughout the course of my career. As an intelligence professional, what we try to do is to make sure that we provide all relevant information to the Bureau if there is an investigation underway that they are looking into criminal activity.
So they accuse Kamala Harris of word salad, which, of course, there's a lot of word salad there, but there's no greater word salad than what you just heard right now. Okay, we can go back to this, but that was John Brennan. There is not a shred of evidence. There was not a shred of evidence. And the same progressives and leftists and morally superior liberal Democrats who claim that that Russia interfered because Trump has a different foreign policy than President Obama. So what? Why would you? It's so illogical and irrational to accuse an incoming president, which of course he'll have, a different foreign policy. That's why we have an election every 4 years, because you either want a different foreign policy or the same foreign policy. If somebody has a different foreign policy and he wins an election, that means the country wants to move away from the prior foreign policy. But Democrats marketed that as, well, there must be something on him by the Ruskies.
Try to issue a statement before the 2016 election alleging Russian interference on behalf of President Trump. Now, obviously, they refused to do that, which then became a big discussion in the Comey investigation and everything else. But this is what kicked it off. He was very.
Diaraki, thank you so very, very much. Diaraki, thank you to my super chat. Thank you.
Very clearly an inside campaign hatched up somewhere. But these folks were in the middle of it, and I think this investigation is a long time coming.
Donald Trump insisted, Francesca, all along that there was nothing to this Russia collusion investigation. It would appear that history has proven him correct, and then you have to go back and wonder, well, how'd this all get going in the first place?
And to pick up on what Annie was saying, I mean, just today we heard the president again bring up during his cabinet meeting the Russia. So this is clearly something that he continues to be upset about. And you were talking about the last presidential campaign as well. I mean, this was something that he brought up repeatedly on the campaign trail and has talked about ad nauseum. So to Annie's point, to hear now that this is something that would be under investigation, which again, this is breaking news, is not particularly surprising.
Again, this is the beginning of an investigation. It could be a long way from a prosecution. Might never happen, but it's breaking news for us tonight. All right, let's go back to the.
It will happen. and so not only will it happen, but you're going to have not only prosecution, but not only prosecution of a number of people, okay? You're going to have indictments, prosecution, and conviction. This is the current Federal Bureau of Investigation director. This is the current director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Okay? Check this out. This is just a couple years back.
Maria, thanks so much for having me from Happy Valley.
So, Kash, connect the dots for us. You heard Devin talking about the Brookings Institute. I'll bring up the graphic of Durham's indictment of Danchenko, talking about Danchenko working as an analyst at Washington.
And by the way, the Durham probe, John Durham was not in a situation where you actually had an independent, or you had the ability. There was zero ability in hindsight, okay? John Ratcliffe wasn't at Central Intelligence. Kash Patel wasn't at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He didn't. These people did not lead. And Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence. These people did not lead America's intel agencies, okay? President Trump did not get, Supreme Court victory after Supreme Court victory. He didn't win the popular vote. The power structure is now under President Trump. And it took him 10 years. So this is during the Durham probe years back. The great thing about the Durham probe, although it didn't lead to major prosecution, is that it compiled for public record and for future prosecutions and convictions, it compiled evidence, a lot of evidence. So John Durham did a good job in terms of compiling evidence to prosecute and convict Comey, Brennan, and others.
Based bank think tank, which is the Brookings Institute, where he focused on Russia and Eurasian geopolitical matters. Tell me about the connection that Danchenko had in Brookings.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. And let's front load the conversation, Maria. John Durham issued subpoenas to the Brookings Institute. I don't think most of America knows that, but he actually issued federal grand jury subpoenas for documentation, which we now know he used in his indictment against Danchenko. And who was Danchenko? Danchenko was Fiona Hill's former research assistant. Who is Fiona Hill? The world probably remembers. She's the one who conjured up the Ukraine impeachment fiasco in her time at the White House. And why is she important? Fiona Hill connected Danchenko to Christopher Steele. A political operative in the White House connected Christopher Steele to his primary source and allowed her to get all this false information into the FBI. How does that relate to Charlie Dolan? Fiona Hill also connected Charlie Dolan, the Clinton ally operative, to now Danchenko, the indicted individual under Durham, whose documentation was recovered by John Durham, thankfully, through his lawful and appropriate use of federal subpoenas. And I think he's got a lot more coming.
The basis for further indictments. And, again.
So everyone who now leads the intel agencies under Trump was talking about how Trump was set up and framed years back. These are the same people. They have all the evidence existed 10 years ago. Okay. We didn't really, it wasn't for public record yet, but 5-6 years ago, 4 years ago during the Durham probe, all of this existed. The Durham probe was actually very good in terms of compiling evidence. But let's continue.
John Durham, over 1,000 other documents that have not yet been declassified that I know include intelligence that goes specifically to this criminal activity that would be the basis for further indictments. And, again, what happened with the Steele dossier, a grand jury is saying was criminal in nature. And I expect that all of the folks that are involved with creating it and peddling it falsely would be in jeopardy.
And that was former Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe with me last week on this program on what he declassified, which, of course, exposed that this dossier and whole Russia collusion lie was a fabrication from Hillary Clinton. I'm back with Kash Patel right now. And Kash, we mentioned Fiona Hill making all of these introductions to Christopher Steele as well as Charles Dolan. Meanwhile, she says she has no idea what they were doing. Here is a quote from her from a closed-door testimony from October of 2019 saying, "I have no knowledge whatsoever of how he developed that dossier. None. I just want to state that."
You can have no knowledge of how a dossier is developed. You could have knowledge of why the dossier is developed, or likely why the dossier would be developed. So Democrats literally purchased a Trump-Russia hoax through the Steele dossier and just paid a fine with the FEC. And then it was Trump that was convicted of campaign finance violations by a state court, even though the FBI, the Federal Election Commission, dropped the case. So did the Department of Justice. That, oh my God, I can't wait till the Supreme Court overturns that, or the appeals court in New York, which will overturn the fraud conviction, which was absurd too.
What are your thoughts on this? And give us your sense of the 3 indictments we've seen so far and where this is going.
Yeah, real quick on Fiona Hill. I think John Durham is on the case here because Fiona Hill has a credibility problem. I believe she lied to Congress there under oath. She connected the main Clinton political operative, who Devin and I had never heard of because DOJ and FBI withheld those documents from us intentionally, I believe so. And now John Durham has exposed that. She connects the Steele operation to the Democratic Party, and she has the gall to go on national TV or into closed-door testimony and say, I don't know what's going on with Steele. But John Durham's on that case, and I think we're going to get there. As to the 3 indictments that John Durham has issued, I believe he's built a sort of triangle of indictments, as I call them. At the top of the pyramid, you have Sussman, who represents an indictment of the Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC, the law firm, and Fusion GPS, funneling tens of millions of dollars to perpetuate the biggest fraud in American history into the FBI. The bottom 2 pillars of the Durham triangle, I believe, are the FBI's, John Durham's indictment of the FBI attorney, which is literally an indictment of the FBI and now a criminal conviction for lying to a federal court to perpetuate a fraud and get a FISA warrant falsely. The last leg of the Durham triangle comes in the form of his recent indictment of Danchenko. Who's Danchenko and why does it matter?
So why is this super important? Because now you have the top, the leaders, the most powerful people during Trump's first administration, the most powerful people in America. John Brennan and James Comey were the most powerful people within government, 2 of the most powerful people. They're now going to be indicted very soon. There's been almost certainly a criminal probe of both of them right when Kash Patel became director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The man you just heard right now is the same director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation that James Comey was. So it was all for naught. There was no point in going after Trump. Thank God he survived that attempt on his life. We had a unfortunate, so tragic. A firefighter lost his life trying to saving his family from an assassin's attempt against Trump. Trump turns his head. They did everything possible to stop Trump. It didn't work. The Supreme Court is now firmly backing Trump always. People are upset with ICE. Like Democrats, I don't think the protesters understand, or people, if you don't like ICE, then you draft legislation to defund ICE, just like the Democrats wanted to defund police. This is not rocket science. You don't have to go after any government official, which is a crime and also immoral. If you think that ICE is immoral, then Democrats should should write legislation and run on the legislation in 2026. They won't do that because they know they would actually lose the House again, because it's popular nationwide what President Trump is doing, enforcing existing laws. They can amend or reform laws. But anyway, let's continue.
Danchenko is Steele's main source, introduced to Steele by Fiona Hill, who Steele relied on to write his dossier, in which he said Steele received credible information from Danchenko? We now know Danchenko's a liar. We also know, because of the Durham investigation, Danchenko provided no credible information to Christopher Steele. So his credibility has been destroyed, and these merchants of menace are finally coming to light thanks to John Durham's great work. And he's got a long way to go. And I'm glad he's getting the the information that Rod Rosenstein and Chris Wray intentionally withheld from Chairman Nunes in our investigation during Russiagate probe.
So on the Kevin Kleinsmith indictment, this is the FBI attorney.
And by the way, with Kash Patel, the rebuttal is, well, none of these people were convicted. It's like, no, you don't understand. The Clinton lawyer, the Clinton attorney, the people that Kash Patel is talking about, there were D.C. juries, and there were the DOJ working under Durham, okay, DOJ officials or maybe his team. There were little tiny loopholes where the jury didn't get evidence, okay? And so the attorney that literally lied was able to evade conviction because the jury did not get the email. I believe it was the jury did not get the Clinton attorney email that actually stated he lied to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Okay, little tiny things like this. Okay, with Danchenko, I believe it was one of the FBI agents literally went to bat for, I think, that defendant. So you had former officials, current officials doing everything possible to say, Durham didn't prosecute anyone. See, it was all no. What Durham did was compile endless evidence showing that there was a setup and framing of President Trump. Okay, and Democrats know this. The Democratic Party for so long has been, catch me if you can. You can't prove anything. Well, it was plausible deniability. We just thought that Trump was a Kremlin operative. Sorry, we had to ruin his life and everybody around him. That's it. Sorry, you can't prove anything. And it's like, no, we know that you lied. We know that you lied through your teeth. We know that you set up and framed Trump. You used the United States government against an innocent American. Every Democrat and liberal and progressive, upset with ICE, and they're enforcing existing laws. Comey and Brennan and others didn't enforce existing laws. They went after an innocent man. Now, if ICE goes after an innocent individual, there's uproar. But when the United States government goes after Donald Trump, an innocent man, the rebuttal from these morally superior, highly educated, liberal Democrats is, well, we just didn't know we had to investigate. You knew exactly what you were doing. You set up someone who was innocent, and you tried to ruin him. And in the end, like Donald Trump is the protagonist in a Charles Bronson movie, or Clint Eastwood, or Chuck Norris, or Sylvester Stallone, he's coming back. They tried to ruin Trump. He's the Obi-Wan Kenobi of politics. They tried to destroy Trump. And anyone who tried to destroy Trump will themselves experience the repercussions of potentially breaking the law in doing so.
Does it end there, or are we going to see a road to others in the FBI perhaps getting arrested for directing Kevin Kleinsmith? This is a young guy who obviously changed paperwork to say that Carter Page was not an asset of the CIA when, in fact, he was.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, I think all roads lead to Andy McCabe, the former deputy director of the FBI, who was caught lying 3 times by the inspector general during his tenure there. Kevin Kleinsmith, a mid-level FBI attorney, cannot pull off the greatest political scandal in history alone. He needs direction from his supervisors. He's a convicted felon. He doctored a piece of paper for the FISA court. Now he has a former...
So this FBI lawyer literally lied too, completely fabricated a document just to get somebody, just to investigate somebody close to Trump. And he was given a slap on the wrist. But I mean, if there are internal emails, for example, you see, this is the thing. The Democratic Party has for so long utilized plausible deniability. Well, we don't know. We had to investigate. No, you didn't. You went after an innocent man. You tried to destroy an innocent man. So what do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going to happen when he wins the popular vote? If you go, this is the thing. People don't realize why Donald Trump is so powerful. Donald Trump simply wants to enforce immigration laws, to impose tariffs, to bring manufacturing back, to limit and prevent, to stop counterinsurgency wars, never sending Americans anywhere. That's the anti-war. That's a anti-war philosophy. That doesn't mean he's not going to engage in military strikes. He's not a pacifist. I would love if he didn't engage in military strikes, but you know what? He's an American president. He's not a pacifist, but he's the least militant of any choice. Infinitely more than Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, President Obama, Kamala Harris, Biden. Less militant than his predecessors. Far less militant. And he just goes along, does his thing, and everyone is trying to stop him in the most corrupt, devious, sinister manner. But they're so inept and corrupt. They're so corrupt that they're also inept. They're so inept as well as corrupt that at the end of the day, Trump wins the popular vote, controls the intel agencies, and then indicts them and prosecutes it, and the conviction is almost certain.
National security prosecutor who did FISAs know how horrendous and how egregious that type of conduct is. But more importantly, I know that it cannot be done alone. It is virtually impossible to get that information to a federal judge for a secret surveillance warrant without the deputy director of the FBI knowing it. And I think all roads lead to Andy McCabe. His credibility is in question, not to mention that of Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Andy McCabe, who orchestrated the insurance policy to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. That's their own text messages.
Real quick before you go, you took the deposition of...
And Andrew McCabe could turn on James Comey and testify against James Comey. Because there could be still, and so could Peter Strzok, so could Lisa Page, so could all of these people. I mean, Comey could testify against Brennan. So, I mean, you never know. Brennan could testify against Comey. James Clapper could testify against both of them. That's when they were always, you heard, they're going to flip and sing. All these low-level Trump officials will flip and sing about Trump's romance with Vladimir Putin, his love letters, the fact that they would romance and go to dinner together. None of this was true. None of it was true. But what was true was the people breaking the law, trying to set up and frame Trump. See, what happens is if you're a political side in the United States of America and you think you have won the future, liberal Democrats believed they controlled the future of America forever. But they were, unfortunately, the politicians were inept, corrupt, and really, truly nefarious in their contempt for political adversaries, especially President Trump. They knew, oh, and by the way, 24/7 negative media coverage, he still wins the popular vote. I mean, they had every advantage possible. Now, whenever you hear a celebrity or, a journalist, Trump, he tried to sell the country to Martians. Whatever. He's there lying as usual.
Jake Sullivan, as I keep saying on this program and have for some time, those who abused power are now in power. Jake Sullivan was the communications person for Hillary Clinton, a manager for her. Now he is working for Joe Biden at the NSA. He said he put out a tweet and a post back in October of 2016. Listen to this. This could be the most direct link yet between Donald Trump and Moscow. Computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump organization to the Russian-based bank.
This was, of course, completely false and completely set up. They literally paid somebody to try to make this absurd link. Whereas Clinton did have servers with top secret intel that forwarded classified data to Anthony Weiner and that almost certainly destroyed classified data, but had, according to Comey himself, James Comey, the Honorable James Comey, there were emails sent and received, hundreds, that had classified data on private servers, almost certainly the entire planet hacked.
Here is his post that Hillary Clinton then tweeted out. Jake Sullivan was peddling and spreading the dossier.
He was, and he has the gall to come into Congress. And as you mentioned, I took so many of those depositions and say he had no idea, like Fiona Hill, how the dossier was created or who the $10 million Jake Sullivan and the DNC were paying was being utilized to collect foreign intelligence fraudulent information. So I think John Durham's on his case. And Maria, wouldn't it be the irony of all ironies for the current national security prosecutor to get charged with an actual felony based on real information and fact and not have this Department of Justice withhold exculpatory evidence like they did to the former national security advisor under Donald Trump? I think that's the accountability that the American public so desperately need. And I think that's where this road is going and where John Durham's taking us. So stay tuned. I think we're only 60 to 70% of the way there.
So again, 18 U.S. Code 371. Okay. I wrote a Federalist article on this. You can type in H.A. Goodman Federalist on YouTube. You can read my writing in the Federalist. 18 U.S. Code 371. They tried to say that Trump was lying about he knew that Biden won fair and square. Nobody believes that. Nobody with a functioning brain cell believes fair and square. Of course Biden won. Of course Biden won. You think, hey man, come on man, cornflakes, man, cornflakes. I beat up cornflakes. And do you think that's fair and square? You think that he defeated Trump, who then Democrats usurped the candidate, the nominee, Biden? What they did to Biden was 100 times worse than what they did to Bernie Sanders, which was an atrocity. But Bernie didn't care. That's the way they roll. Oh, thank you, Debbie, for cheating me. This was fantastic. 2016. I still live in 2016, by the way. So I'm like a hologram from 2016. But anyway, they cheated Bernie Sanders. What they did to Biden was 10 billion times worse. He won his primary. Okay? They were corrupt enough to prevent Bernie Sanders from actually winning the primary, which he would have won. Which, at the end of the day, he just would have been a tool of the Democratic Party like he is now. Unfortunately. But you're talking about the most authoritarian, the most totalitarian, the most despotic, the most allergic to democracy. Biden won his primary, and they kicked him to the curb because George Clooney and Hollywood said, you know what, he's a good man. He has to step down. What? What does that even mean? What does that mean? A man won his primary. But again, nobody cares. But this is the corruption. If you're inept and corrupt, that's a bad combination. That's the Democratic Party. And now Trump is, God bless James Brown, the big payback. Trump is playing the James Brown song on continual loop in the White House, the big payback.
Senator, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
You came back to some pretty powerful news. I mean, were you the first one to suggest this to the president? And did you talk to him about this since you've returned?
I'm going to talk to him about it this weekend some, about the trip to Russia and also about John Brennan. I've been calling for a review of the security clearances of a lot of folks, Peter Strzok and others, for months and months and months. I wrote a letter to the FBI director last January asking, does he still have clearance? But with John Brennan, I think what the left is ignoring is that I think he should have had his clearance revoked for cause. He leaked information that came out in the media that we had a double agent in Yemen. Remember when we were going after the underwear bomber? There still is a bomb maker in Yemen. He leaked that to the media, to people, Richard Clark, who had a security clearance, and then he went on television saying, oh, not to worry, we have a double agent in Yemen. The double agent was still there, and he put that agent's life at risk. John Brennan should have been fired for that alone.
And then the spying on the Senate committee, the Dianne Feinstein, like, you guys are looking into my staff's computers. He denies it. They get the results of from the documents. It turns out they were totally spying.
There's also a question of,
we weren't spying on the computers of Dianne Feinstein. We were gently browsing certain monitors to see if they were needed cleaning, and in the process, perhaps saw some things that Feinstein and Democrats wrote. We would never spy on Democrats, as well as set up and frame President Trump. That would never happen.
whether he lied to the House Intelligence Committee when he said he did not know who paid for the fake Trump dossier. He said, I didn't know. So there's two possibilities. He's either lying or he's incompetent. Because if he's in charge of the CIA and they're using this fake dossier and no one bothered to ask who paid for it.
Didn't he say he didn't know about it initially?
I think he said he didn't know it was paid for.
Oh, was that kind of fuzzy?
Yeah, so the head of the CIA doesn't know that this fake dossier was paid for by the Clinton campaign. So that's either incompetence or he's lying, one of the two.
Senator, he was pressed on this about Brennan yesterday and about the security clearance. Brennan was pressed on it yesterday, and then he was pressed on, well, could it be that the president is answering to a third party, not just to the American voters? Let's watch.
I don't know. He is the one who has to account for those previous actions, and I don't know what he may be concerned about in terms of what might be divulged as part of this investigation. I find his attitude and behavior toward Vladimir Putin and the Russians very, very puzzling. I don't know what it is that is behind that. I certainly don't know all the things that Mr. Trump has been involved in over the years, and I do not pretend to have that knowledge.
Yeah, and today
I find his behavior troubling, even though he's a new president, and America wanted a new foreign policy, but why would he deviate from President Obama's foreign policy? I find that behavior troubling, very troubling. Does the Russians have something on him? Maybe.
All those I don't know, Senator, but today the New York Times, he writes in part at the end, Mr. Trump's claims of no collusion are, in a word, hogwash. But he apparently says he doesn't know, but then his claims of no collusion are hogwash. No, the man is unhinged. I mean, that's the whole statement there. Unhinged.
All right. Well, the thing is that, you look at a guy who called the president treasonous. So the commander-in-chief he calls treasonous, and apparently that would be advocating for the death penalty for the president, and yet he still wants access to the nation's secret. Crazy.
So Russia, you just came back from your trip to the former.
So this was years back, but this is one of the best. This is one of the best, and you gotta give it to, John Brennan is not as good at what he does than James Comey. Nobody is better than James Comey. He is so fantastic. Check this out.
Director, I have one question regarding my opening comment, and I view it as a most important question, and I hope you will answer it. Why was it necessary to announce 11 days before a presidential election that you were opening an investigation on a new computer without any knowledge of what was in that computer? Why didn't you just do the investigation?
So this is about the Comey letter, which preceded the absurd, fake, phony Trump-Russia hoax. So the cover-up, and then a further cover-up in the Comey letter in a very bizarre manner, and then the absurd Russia hoax.
Investigation as you would normally, with no public announcement.
Yeah, great question, Senator. Thank you. October 27th, the investigative team that had finished the investigation in July, focused on Secretary Clinton's emails, asked to meet with me. So I met with them that morning, late morning, in my conference room, and they laid out for me what they could see from the metadata on this fella Anthony Weiner's laptop.
This fella, Anthony Weiner. Who's this fella? Who's this fella, Anthony Weiner? Oh, that's right. Former New York politician. Former congressman, yeah. Former top Democratic official. Married, I believe, to a top official working with Hillary Clinton. And check out what this fella, Anthony Weiner, has to do with Hillary's emails.
Have been seized in an unrelated case.
The unrelated case was Anthony Weiner showing a picture of his last name to the entire planet. People, individuals who should never, ever, ever have been sent that email. We won't get too deep into it, but it's so buffoonish and nefarious. It's crazy.
What you could see from the metadata was that there were thousands of Secretary Clinton's emails on that device. including what they thought might be the missing emails from her first 3 months as Secretary of State.
The missing emails from his first 3 months, from her first 3 months as Secretary of State. So this is directly linked to the criminal probe that just happened an hour ago. Clinton had no emails for her first 3 months as Secretary of State. How on earth is that even possible? Okay? It's not even possible. It's not even rational or logical to believe that would be possible in the United States of America. No country would allow their version of Secretary of State to have private servers with the first 3 months of emails completely missing, including classified data.
We never found any emails from her first 3 months. She was using a Verizon BlackBerry then, and that's obviously very important because if there was evidence that she was acting with bad intent, that's where it would be in the first 3 months.
But they weren't there.
Look, can I just finish my answer, Senator? Yeah. And so they came in and said, we can see thousands of emails from the Clinton email domain, including many, many, many from the Verizon Clinton domain, BlackBerry domain. They said, we think we got to get a search warrant to go get these. And the Department of Justice agreed we had to go get a search warrant. So I agreed. I authorized them to seek a search warrant, and then I faced a choice. And I've lived my entire career by the tradition that if you can possibly avoid it, you avoid any action in the run-up to an election that might have an impact, whether it's a dog catcher election or President of the United States. But I sat there that morning, and I could not see a door labeled "No Action Here."
What's behind door labeled action?
I could see 2 doors, and they were both actions. One was labeled speak, the other was labeled conceal.
Da-da-da-da-da. We have door named speak and door named conceal. It's your choice. Door named speak for 500. Oh, it's the Comey letter. Clinton loses the 2016. Quick, let's blame Russia. And all the while, this was about servers with top secret intelligence on them. The height. You can't even transfer top secret intelligence onto servers. It's literally impossible. But these are the morally superior Democrats. Let's get back to door named speak.
Because here's how I thought about it. I'm not trying to talk you into this, but I want you to know my thinking. Having repeatedly told this Congress, we are done and there's nothing there, there's no case there, there's no case there, to restart in a hugely significant way, potentially finding the emails that would reflect on her intent from the beginning and not speak about it would require an act of concealment, in my view. And so I stared at speak and conceal. Speak would be really bad. There's an election in 11 days. Lordy, that would be really bad. Concealing, in my view, would be catastrophic.
Lordy.
Catastrophic. Not just to the FBI, but well beyond. And honestly, as between really bad and catastrophic, I said to my team, we've got to walk into the world of really bad. I've got to tell Congress that we're restarting this, not in some frivolous way, in a hugely significant way. And the team also told me we cannot finish this work before the election. And then they worked night after night after night, and they found thousands of new emails. They found classified information on Anthony Weiner. Somehow, her emails are being forwarded to Anthony Weiner, including classified information.
What are you talking about? These are the same Democrats that went after Trump for 10 years. They had classified data being forwarded to Anthony Weiner as he's sending pictures of his last name to the planet. And then he served prison like the good, morally superior liberal. What? You would need a hazmat suit to even touch Anthony Weiner's computer. What is it doing receiving classified data from... Is the Honorable James Comey correct on this? Because there was a criminal probe just launched now by Kash Patel.
Of new emails, they found classified information on Anthony Weiner. Somehow, her emails are being forwarded to Anthony Weiner, including classified information by her assistant, Huma Abedin. And so they found thousands of new emails and then called me the Saturday night before the election and said, thanks to the wizardry of our technology, we've only had to personally read 6,000. We think we can finish tomorrow morning, Sunday. And so I met with them. And they said, we found a lot of new stuff. We did not find anything that changes catastrophic. I said to my hugely significant way, worked night after night after night, and they found thousands of new emails. They found classified information on Anthony Weiner. Somehow, her emails are being forwarded to Anthony Weiner, including classified information.
They had classified information being forwarded to Anthony Weiner? Where was John Brennan? Classified data was being forwarded to Anthony Weiner. The Weiner man? Let's investigate Trump for collusion with the Russians. I mean, you can't make this up. And this is exactly why there's a criminal probe of the Honorable James Comey. He'll turn on Brennan, which would be quite amusing. Brennan will turn on him. James Clapper will turn on both of them, actually. It's not even, this is beyond... It's like watching Benny Hill, or it's like watching, I love Benny Hill, but it's like watching some kind of it's like you can't even acknowledge how absurd all of this is. It's so amusing and hilarious, and in the most surreal manner. Anthony Weiner is being forwarded classified data from Hillary Clinton's emails, and they went after Trump for 10 years. That's why they're going to be, that's the direct link between being convicted. You pick and choose. If you allow Hillary Clinton emails to be forwarded to Anthony Weiner, even the classified ones, and then you're worried about Trump and Russia and the bots on Twitter, this is a big problem. Let's continue.
By her assistant, Huma Abedin. And so they found thousands of new emails and then called me the Saturday night before the election and said, thanks to the wizardry of our technology, we've only had to personally read 6,000. We think we can finish tomorrow morning, Sunday. And so I met with them. And they said, we found a lot of new stuff. We did not find anything that changes our view of her intent.
There was no intent to use a private server, even though the servers were private, hidden from the United States government, and forwarding classified data to Anthony Weiner. But other than that, there was zero intent. Of course, Clinton had the Clinton Foundation, but that would certainly not be any emails that were deleted. Over half of her emails were deleted. The point is not about Clinton's emails, which apparently nobody cares about that now. That was the most absurd. That was the greatest cybersecurity nightmare of all time. But again, it's when the Democrats get away with endless criminality, eventually President Trump's going to win the popular vote. When he wins the popular vote, he's then going to indict the people who tried to destroy him. And these people will almost certainly be convicted because they broke the law in trying to set up and frame an innocent man. Hit subscribe, everybody. It's happening. It's happening. Hit subscribe to my super chat. Thank you. I know people are like, nothing's ever going to happen. I don't trust it. This is a different ball game. The Supreme Court backs Trump daily. And this is a completely different ball game, ladies and gentlemen. You will get top officials in President Obama's administration convicted of major crimes against the country, not just President Trump. Trump was an incoming president. Democrats and Republicans as well had no right. Republicans as well had no right to go after and frame and set up an innocent man in Donald Trump. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. See you tomorrow, everybody. This is huge. I'll be doing uploads on this as well tomorrow. Hit subscribe. Watch this channel all